I'll tell you once you deliver your whole soliloquy, I'll come and pop your balloon. Practice problems for Purdy. According to Sports Illustrated's Grant Cohn, Purdy struggled again in practice. Cohn writing, Purdy threw lots of passes to receivers he wouldn't normally target during games and completed just 6 of 12 throws, 50%. After a few of his incompletions, Greg, he turned away from the intended target in disgust. Purdy can't get Brandon Ayuk back fast enough. Now, we're going to talk more about Ayuk, who was there but not catching any passes. But right now, we'll get to Brock's training camp struggles. Something or nothing.
All right, well, before I even answer, let me pull back the curtain a bit, because we are in a weird spot when it comes to Brock Purdy training camp coverage. Because the two people who cover this team most closely, Grant Cohn of Sports Illustrated and David Lombardi of The Athletic, neither of which are really neutral arbiters in my eyes. I think Grant has a pessimistic view of Purdy, which I happen to believe is the correct one, but I will admit it's not straight down the middle. Meanwhile, I told you this morning when you were asking about this potential bias, David Lombardi, I think, truly believes he might be the second coming of Tom Brady. And today I tried to look up what David had written about training camp yesterday, but instead what he had written today was a 2,000-word opus about Brock's time at Iowa State, including an amazing fake on a read option in practice from 2017.
Well, practice matters, I guess.
So again, it is going to be hard to get right down the middle, but I think it is fair to say Brock has struggled a bit in this camp. And until Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk are back, him without Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk is something to watch. Because, once again, I think he is the biggest X factor in the entire NFL this year. I truly believe that. If Brock Purdy is the guy that Brew currently claims to believe he is, and then years later will deny he ever believes in him, they were just the numbers, then the Niners are set up to be Chiefs West. They have a brilliant play caller. They have excellent players on both sides of the ball. They will have a cost-controlled quarterback for the next couple of years, and then who cares that he costs a bunch? He's a great player at the most important position. If he's not that, then this year is most likely the year we find out. And the reason I have such a skeptical lens is because I do feel like I've seen this story before. And folks can say it's not the same, and it's not the exact same. But if I show you Brock's has 27 starts, Jimmy's first 27 starts, and we put them side by side, I mean, it's not apples and bowling balls, fellas. And by the way, I think Brock is better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I do. But when that is in my mind or in my brain, and I saw it, and I felt like we were having the same arguments, it is going to be hard for me to dive in, head first the way I would if it were C.J. Stroud, or the way I would if it were any player in any other system than this player in this system. So yeah, it is something to me, Coach.
Well, when you do look at those numbers, he's got significantly less interceptions.
Yes.
He's got a significantly higher quarterback rating.
Because of the interceptions, because all the other numbers are the same.
Okay, so he's got a significantly higher quarterback rating. And then he played in the league a lot less than Jimmy Garoppolo had when Jimmy Garoppolo got his opportunity.
Yes.
So he was a lot further on. So to say that it's apples to apples, I don't think that's completely fair. This is a guy
to green apples.
Okay, but this is a guy that came in and very few expectations. He has to take over a situation. He does incredibly well his first year. I'm as skeptical as you in terms of whether or not he's truly the answer, but he did answer a lot of those questions when he was able to come back in meaningful games last season, which is another step in his progression. And I think part of the reason this is a story is because he's getting more scrutiny, and with Brandon Ayuk out, that's adding more scrutiny as well, as opposed to this. If Ayuk was back and he was having these problems, maybe it would be a little bit more of a concern, but it still really isn't, because in the games that have counted, he's been excellent.
Well, I'm going to go and say it's something. It's something because yesterday I was on the side of a guy who hadn't thrown any interceptions, and I said that was something. And so for a guy who has been struggling in camp, it has to be something. Anytime you're starting to show frustration and it's becoming more visible, and that's not your character trait. That's not what you typically walk around doing. Like, he's a pretty stoic, even-keeled guy. He never gets too high, never gets too low. So when you start to hear stories like this, you do want to read into it a little bit, not overstate it, but you want to start watching it. And one of the things that we are kind of looking and waiting for is to see how real and how stable Brock Purdy truly is, and if the bottom is about to fall out. Yeah. That's just what we're kind of waiting to see. Until he's going to always have to continue to prove that he's going to be that guy. Like, that's just going to be his role right now until maybe this season and then the next. We'll see. But right now, if you're missing players, when we've seen him miss players in actual games, it's like, okay, Brock, you gotta kind of put on the big backpack today. Yeah. He's not been able to wear that backpack.
My concern or question is, has he really been different in this camp than the camp before? Or are people just viewing him with a different lens?
No, I think it's...
Are they viewing him more harshly than they have in the past? And now they're noticing things that were always there that they just didn't notice in the previous camp because they were so enamored with the story from his first season.
That can very well be the case. But once you start to perform and you start to be considered one of the best year after year, this is second year now, and he's considered to now be one of the, he was in MVP conversation last season. So you're going to be talked about a little differently. You're going to be held to a different standard going into this camp.
And last year in camp, he was coming off the elbow, so he wasn't even like a full go the whole time. And the year before, he was third string on the depth chart. But go ahead. You said you were going to burst the bubble, so I want to hear because you also got angry at Greg during his, I thought, very eloquent and resplendent commentary.
They were splendid.
Well, a few things.
Yeah.
One, I care about the games that matter. Like Coach. In the last game I watched of Brock was the Super Bowl, and he played well. So I'm not putting as much weight on these practices, throwing to guys that he wouldn't normally throw to, as I do on the Super Bowl. In fact, I weigh 10,000 times more than a practice. Two, I've got a friend named Yevon. Yevon is a bit of an exaggerator, but in a positive way. Like, everything's like, oh, this party was so amazing. Until one time I overheard him describing a party that I was at, and the party was just fine.
Yeah.
So I went through and I realized he just exaggerates. It's okay. It's part of his charm. I went through all of the commentary Grant Cohn had today.
Yeah.
It was titled, the article was The Good and the Not So Good.
Yeah, that's
And Brock was one of the not so good.
Yeah.
Here are the other guys. Danny Gray. Guess what he did? He ran a back corner fade in the end zone and barely reached his arms up when the ball arrived. He's hopeless. Okay, so that's out for Danny Gray. He's done. Ricky Pearsall. He missed a practice because he was hurt.
Oh, he's made of glass.
This guy's made of glass.
Well, it's his third injury.
What a disappointing first-round pick. Yeah. We haven't played a game yet. He missed a practice. He's made of glass. And guess who else got the final spot?
Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, I read the article.
Oh, my goodness. He ran a trick play.
It was so
and
slow
it didn't work. It was slow to develop. and Grant, who I do appreciate colorful writing, scrap that play, Kyle. That's from Grant telling Kyle Shanahan what plays he should run.
But hold on.
So I'm taking Grant, and I do appreciate it. We've cornered the market on cogent analysis, right? There's not a lot of money to be made there. You got to go to the extremes. But the fact that Brock, I'm taking all of this as a bit of exaggeration.
Okay, except here's the problem, I think, with that analysis, is you only went through, because this is what the guy does for every training camp practice, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So all it takes to get the exaggeration in your favor is to be on the good side. Have a good practice, and you get that. It's not all tearing people down.
No, it's not. There's six good ones.
Like a lot.
Right. No,
there were six good ones.
There's six good ones and six bad ones.
Yeah.
And so, and again, to be fair, let's check the roster when the roster cut down happens. If Danny Gray makes the team,
he's hoping.
I'm guessing
he's not going to make it.
And I'm guessing no.
Ricky Pearsall made a glass.
Okay, well, here's the other
Samuel L. Jackson.
Again, it can be a little early, but I guarantee you, this very moment, they're like, hey, John Lynch, it's a weird thing. We're going to allow it. Well, you can have a do-over on that first-round pick. Again, it's very early, but you can have a do-over. Do you think he'd take it? Do you think it'd be like, hey,
I already got one with
the guy who went 32, Xavier Worthy, the guy you didn't pick at 31? Flip-flop it. Would you like to do it? I bet he would.
Oh, yeah. How many catches have they had? Zero.
I'm just telling you. It's fine.
Zero.
They also said that Brock Purdy was 50%. It's not like he only had one completion. He was 50% to a bunch of dudes that he doesn't normally work with.
But those are the dudes he might have to. Okay.
Yeah, but maybe they dropped.
No, he's off the team.
Did we have any drops?
Xavier Worthy.
Were there any drops in it?
I don't know. I feel like that.
I think we got to talk about Kyle Shanahan's play calling.
See, okay.
He's running these crazy
They're
plays.
slow developing.
Slow to develop. What's Kyle? Has Kyle Shanahan lost his fastball? Well, I don't know. I've seen him in the Super Bowl a few times. Hasn't won yet. Pumpkin mode in any event. The other big story here is Brandon Ayuk. Back at